Welcome back, guys. Today I'll add some more to what we have learned. So there's some code that I was working with before I started recording. I'll try and pretty much replicate this code, but explaining as we go each and every step of the way. So we've done certain things before, like for example, we've done functions, we've done files. So I want to actually work with a structure where I put a function, I also put a file in it, so that we can be able to see how we can implement how we are doing what we are doing in a specific manner or in a specific method that we'll then be able to use for what we want to learn. So I'll create a new project that I would want you to follow along with me and explain as we proceed. Okay, so my project is going to be combined elements. That's what I'll call it, and it should deal with the main aspects that we've actually worked with so far. So I actually do each element as we proceed, and I'll also put comments so that we know which element is which and how we use it. So the first element that we want to work with is a structure, which is what we have just done now. And we said our structure, we use the keyword struct, and then we put the name of the structure. So it can be values, like we did previously, and then our values would then be what we want to work with in the particular element that we want to work with. So for example, we can have a float f, okay, that then stands for our float. We can have a double d. We can also have an int I, like that. These then become our values, the values that we want to work with within our structure. And then at the same time now, we want to also be able to use the next element that we've worked with, which was a function. So this then becomes our function, and how we will be able to use it. So our function will also need to be declared the same way we've done our structure. So if you remember, we also mentioned in our data types that we've got a data type called void. So we can say void, and then we put the name of the function that we want to do. So the name of the function can be many, for lack of a better word, right? And then we want to add elements to our many. But at the same time, we also want to be able to use our structure within our many, and also to have our structure work within our main. So how we do that is we actually put the keyword struct in the parameters section, and then we say values, and then we put an identifier, which can be IT, like that. So that then becomes our identifier for each of the elements that are in the structure. So what we then want to do is we want to initialize each of the elements and see how we can be able to use them within our function. Okay, so for example, let's say we want to do it by using our operators. We worked with operators before, and it can be an easy option for us to work with. So for example, we can say f equals to 12 point something. Okay, that then means we want to actually initialize our f. But bear in mind, if we can't actually use it without referencing our structure. So what we then need to do is we actually need to say this is what we want to have. So let's say it dot, we then select f, we then get that value. The same goes for the next two values. We simply say it dot d is equal to that value. Okay, and then also we say it dot I is equal to that number. Okay, so in other words, we've actually initialized each of our elements. We've got f, d, and I. Okay, this simply means we have actually taken the values from our structure and gave them an answer that we would actually want to work with. Okay, but at the same time now we also want to add this information to a file. Okay, so to then do that, we know that this is what we would have done. Okay, but now we want to actually add it to a file. So we need to actually put a file, and then we put a file pointer like that, and then we need to have our f open, and then it gives us the contents of what we want to actually do. So before f of open, actually I left out something. It's fp is equal to f open, and then we want to be able to write to a specific file. So put w plus, and then we need to create a file that we'll be able to work with. So let's say our file is called so we need to name our file and maybe give it a name like data.txt, like that. And then let me just refer to my work. So I need to have a string, so I'll just copy this and use that as my string, and put it as a variable there, so that I can actually be able to work with my string. Also at the same time, I need to put my content. So my content, I will do it this way. After having to write that, let me copy that as well, so that I know what I'm doing at that particular point. So at this particular point, I want to be able to add my content to my file like that. So this is adding the content to the file. So now what I need to then do is have this setup, so to speak, where I use an fprintf and the content that I want to put in the file. So I'm not going to use what we see there, but maybe I'll just copy that section only, and then tell you as we're adding the content that we want to work with. So the content that I want to work with is as follows. It's a double, a float, and an integer. Okay, so this then means I want to add it in the manner that I see fit. So we can say int equals %d, and then we want double equals %f, and then the last one is a float, and our float, we want it to be %f as well. Okay, and then from there now we want a new line. Okay, in our new line, we then want to actually implement the content that is in our structure, or the content from our structure. So we then say it dot, the first thing is integer, so I. We also say it dot double, which is our d, and then it dot float, which is the last value. Okay, then we close brackets, we put a semicolon. Okay, in other words, we have actually put our content within the file, but at the same time we also want to use our rewind for the file, and then we also want to use this same concept that we've got there. So let me actually just copy that and put it in our code. So it's just simply putting a rewind, which is a file type that simply maybe takes us back to see what is in our file, and then scanf is another content that we can be able to use to actually scan or to add information to our particular file. So in other words, instead of using it this way, I'll just need to put my it.f like that, and then if I copy and paste that, I can do it for the remainder of the two elements, which is I and D, like that. And then outside of that, I need to then use my FP close, like that. Although now I'm actually realizing that I shouldn't have copied the string, because there is no way I'll actually be using it, unless if I create something that I would want to use as a string. In fact, let's actually just do that, although this will now not be in our structure, but we can still do it this way and say our string is happy birthday, like that. So this then becomes our string, and that is happy birthday. We can also be able to do it this way, to say f print f, like that, gives us our fp, and we then want to say contents of string, put a space, maybe a tab, and then we put percentage s, put a new line, and we put a comma, and then we put str in brackets 80, so that it gives us that content. And then this then marks the end of our function. So we've got our structure for values, and we've got those values. We've got our function many with the exact content that we've got there, and then now we've got our main function. So now our main function, we need to actually call struct again, and then our struct is still values, but we also need an identifier which we can put as p. Okay, this is so that when we call the function main, we can be able to reference by also referencing another structure, like that. So in other words, this then means we have called our function many, which points to our structure values which points to our structure values on the outside, but we are then working with our two functions, the main and the many function. So as it stands, we are supposed to have a working program, unless if I made an error. So we want to add content to the file. So I think everything was running in the background because there's nothing that we've entered. By now, I'm sure everything has been saved to a file somewhere. So we just need to go to combine the elements and look for a file called data.txt. I think instead of us opening it, we can just come here and going open. We then select where this information is stored, and it's called combined elements. Okay, yes, we've got data. So we open it inside code editor, and it's an empty text file. So in other words, our code is wrong somewhere, but it's actually created the text file. So it then means somewhere along the lines we've actually made an error, but we've got our working function plus structure plus the file aspect of things. Okay, so I think I can end the lesson here and then explain where we would have gone wrong in the next lesson, because I think if I proceed, I may lose you. I gave you a little bit too much information in this particular one, but in the next one I'll try and give you a reason why we failed to achieve our desired objective.